Shabbat Shalom. In this week's Parshat Vayetze, we're introduced to the children of Jacob, to the 12 tribes of Israel. We've talked about the covenant of the Sheva mitzvot Bnei Noach as something that applies to all humanity. And while the three great Abrahamic religions look to a common ancestor, when we talk about Brito Shel Avraham Avinu, we're talking about a specific commitment and not a birthright. But we are born Bnei Yisrael, 12 tribes. Who are they there? 12 sons with different identities, personalities, fortes and foibles that we'll encounter in the parshiot we read over the next several months. Together and separately, they have an identity and an integrity. Brothers together. In Tehillim 133, King David writes, Hinei ma tovu manayim Shevat Achim gam Yachad. How goodly and wonderful it is when siblings are able to sit together. Not just Shevat Achim Yachad, sitting together, but gam Yachad. The word gam means also. When we sit together, I'm able to say, also me, also you. We belong together, but there is an accommodation of our differences. The idea of diversity within Judaism is something that is particularly looked at by Natan Sharansky in his new book, Never Alone, Prison, Politics and My People, and I'm going to be interviewing him about it on November the 14th. He asks a question: do we today share a common commitment to be one people, to continue our historic journey together? And he writes, despite our differences, the members of every Zionist party in Israel agree that every Jew in the world should consider Israel home. That makes dealing with diaspora Jewry not just a part of every politician's mandate, but preserving and protecting the Jewish people remain broadly recognized as central to the state's mission. He says, while chairing the Jewish Agency, when I looked through the diaspora's lens, I noted an internal Jewish glue that keeps us together. Even though many Jews criticize Israel harshly, the vast majority know that they need Israel if they want to continue the Jewish journey. Some walk away, but most, especially in the last 20 years, have recognized that Israel is the best medium for connecting to their Jewish roots, building their Jewish identity, and giving their grandchildren a shot at remaining Jewish. He says, as I often explain, Jewish tradition and Israel serve as the only functional brakes against assimilation, and it's most effective to use both together. He adds, finally, examining Israel-diaspora relations from a more bird's-eye perspective is reassuring. Crises clarify it all. Just as we all fought for Soviet Jewish freedom, when Israel's at war, the Jewish people come together instinctively. Jews from all over the world put their differences aside, ignore their personal agendas, and mobilize. Suddenly, we're all one people, and we are all together at Mount Sinai. He says, from my experience, putting all three perspectives together, number one, Israel's ongoing concern and growing investment. Number two, the diaspora's new commitment to identity building through Israel. And number three, our shared commitment to the Jewish journey shows something profound. True, we sometimes seem to be one people divided by one religion, and sometimes we seem to be one people divided by one state, but we remain one people. Hinei ma tovu manayim Shevat Achim gam Yachad. Elsewhere, Sharansky writes, it's Democracy 101, better to argue with rather than about each other. We might argue, but when we're talking to each other, that is good. Some of our commentators take the Shevat Achim Gam Yachad question further. Shevat Achim Yachad is okay, that means live and let live. But Gam Yachad is more than accommodating. It's even when we're elbow to elbow jostling for the same resources, we recognize the togetherness. Separately, coexisting, obviously that's manageable. But even when we're jostling, even with our differences, if we recognize together, that is good. We're first called Bnei Yisrael, not this week, but in next week's Parsha, and I think that the context is significant. It's after wrestling with an angel, which is an internal questing for spiritual right. It's when we're told that to this day we don't eat the fats of the hindquarters of the animal. That's adherence to tradition. And it's when we, as Bnei Yisrael, were crossing back into the land and making our way home, when we have the spiritual question at our heart, when we recognize where it is that we have come from, and when we know where it is we are going. Hinei ma tovu manayim, how good it is. Shevet Achim gam Yachad. We're blessed with the covenant when we're close enough to embrace each other's individuality. Warmly, and to you all, Shabbat Shalom.